What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 9 of Trust the Process. This is a special episode for us. We really aren't going to talk about anything except for the interview that Mike and I were lucky to have. Mike's here with me right now. We got to interview Scott Manze, my brother, the voice of the JU Dolphins. And Mike, how did you think that went?
I think that went really well. A little longer than expected, but it was still a good and I think it was a great interview because I actually learned a little bit more about Scott as in his professional life and also a little bit of personal life too as well.
Yeah.
Because there's something I did not know about. Like there's some things I didn't know about Scott going into it, and obviously because you know more about Scott because he's your brother. But I feel like this interview definitely helped a lot in terms of possibly not even getting his name out to or at least our audience, to the audience out there as well on social media. But also me personally get to know him a little bit more in terms of how he became a broadcaster and all that information, all that good stuff.
Exactly. I mean, I know Scott, of course. I lived with him. I've known him obviously my entire life because he is my brother. But we asked some pretty good questions about his career and options that he would have in case he wasn't doing what he was doing, and so on and so forth. This is probably our longest episode ever. We do hope you stick around till the end.
Definitely our longest one, but trust me, it is worth the wait.
Definitely.
I know it's about an hour, maybe hour and 10 minutes at most, but it is definitely a real worthwhile interview.
Yes, so definitely stick around, listen to the whole thing. You'll really learn a lot about our local celebrity, Scott Manze, and we really hope you enjoy this. We'll just go ahead and segue in, take a listen here, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, welcome back to this special interview with Trust the Process. We've got special guest Scott Manze, my brother, on the show today. And I just looked at Winston. He's got something dangling from his mouth. What the hell?
How is that even possible?
I don't know. It's not drool either. I think it's just a hair. Anyway. We have a special guest, Scott Manze, my brother, on the show today. I'm going to say the voice of JU, because you are that, and also the creator of River City Rogue, because you deserve that title.
I'll be a co-creator, but thank you.
That works as well. But we also want to wish you a late happy birthday, June 30th.
Thank you. Inching ever closer to the big 3-0. So it's funny because you get to a certain point, right? You turn 21 and it's like an exciting birthday. And that's kind of the end of the exciting birthdays there for a while. You turn 25 and you start renting a car. I don't know how exciting that actually is. And then you hit 30 and then it's like, okay, well.
Don't forget 25. Your insurance goes down too.
Well,
yeah?
Unless you get an incident, which I
true.
can attest to. So we won't get into that today, though.
No, we will not. We wanted to do a special interview with a special local talent, and we were lucky enough to nab Scott. You know, his schedule's so busy, it was really hard to get him in here, but we were able to finesse this one, and we're really happy to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for going through my publicist and my agent and arranging this because summertime, it is so hard to nail me down.
Yeah, they were very good to work with. So anyway, we wanted to ask you some questions since you and Richard have done a really good job with the Press Box Pizza Pod, which if you haven't listened to, you should definitely. They've got some really good local guests on there, including Ryan O'Halloran, which, I mean, he's now gone. But you'll really learn more about these guys that you would have no idea about. And that's kind of our goal today. Because a lot of people, I notice, I talk to them, and they know, like, I know that last name. And they're like, yeah, well, my brother's Scott Manze. And they're like, oh, yeah, I worked with him at JU. Or, oh, yeah, I've seen him at events and stuff like that. So this is just, I think, our way of getting people to learn a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and so on and so forth.
All right. Well, I'm honored, and I'm ready. So let's get it started.
Well, we're going to go first with tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for the people that do not know.
Well, technically, my title is in Jacksonville University Athletics, and I am the Assistant Director of Athletic Communications and Broadcast Media. I think it just changed, so that's why it's a little fresh on the mind. But my main job is that I broadcast the football and basketball games on the radio, as well as baseball on our internet audio stream. And I handle some of the ESPN3 broadcasts that we do on campus as well. I do the football home games. I'll do some baseball, some soccer, and some things of the like. And I also have a lot of less glamorous things behind the scenes, but I've grown kind of in the role and in the department over the last couple of years. I serve as the sports information director for baseball, which, if you're not sure what that is, it's anything that goes on the website, social media. That stuff is prepared and written by someone like myself, and we coordinate with the other schools' SID to exchange information. Like a lot of times, here's just a basic example of like what it's like as an SID in baseball in the college game is that say we're playing a 3-game series against a team that weekend. I'll reach out to the opposing team's SID on, say, Wednesday, and depending on whether you're the home or the road team, there's sort of an etiquette to who announces first, but you're looking for the opposing team's starting rotation, who are the 3 pitchers they'll be throwing that weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You'll be looking for rosters. You get stats, depending on what time of the year it is. Sometimes you'll get last year's stats, this year's stats, sometimes conference stats, and you'll get that over to the coaching staff so they can start putting together a scouting report and all for the games that weekend. And then once the games roll around, you have to put a preview out on the website. You have to monitor the social media, of course. Once the actual game day comes in, luckily I have somebody that helps me with this because it's very difficult to do my job, especially for home games and broadcast at the same time.
Oh, yeah,
but it's the official scoring. So say you go onto a website and you pull up live stats. Say you go to ESPN.com and you pull the live stats for a game. Well, that is always being generated by whoever the host school is. And it goes through a program and all. But that means you have to enter in every single play, every single pitch, so that it'll kick out to the live stats and people can access that. So I don't handle that part. There's an intern that has helped me out in the last year that does that during the games, and he'll also tweet home games, but I will tweet during the road games in between every half inning. It's a little update of what happened and the score so that people can follow along online. And then, of course, after the game, it's a matter of writing a post-game recap, getting a quote from our head coach, sometimes a player if we won the game, and then getting that out, sending it out to the local media, also coordinating events with the local media, such as this year when JU made a regional for the first time since 2011, there was a lot more local media coverage, of course. And we had a watch party on campus for the selection show on Memorial Day Monday. We also had several open media availabilities throughout the course of leading into conference tournament play and the regional in Gainesville, and finding ways, because we are, this is a market which we're obviously behind the Jaguars, even Florida and Florida State still to a large extent, and some of the other professional teams, but there's still a lot of interest in the local colleges, to D1 schools in this city, and you gotta find a way to try and push the narrative a little bit there and get the media involved. But that's just a little snapshot of some of the aspect of my job that people probably don't understand immediately. When I say I'm broadcasting a game, I think that's pretty straightforward, but it's there's a lot more that I do to have a full-time job within the athletic department other than just throw the headset on game day and give the play-by-play.
I think that goes with a lot of jobs, out there. You think like firefighters, they just put out fires. Police officers, they just arrest people. There's a lot more to what you do, and that's really like the SID portion. There's a lot to that, and I can understand how that would be a little overwhelming. With JU being the size school that it is and the competition that comes with it, is it sometimes you find yourself like struggling trying to get in contact with other SIDs and trying to communicate and get that information to the coaching staff?
Fortunately, it's rare. It's few and far between. I mean, JU's Division I, so all the other Division I schools we play, they have their stuff together, I guess you could say.
Yeah, Florida State, I'm sure they're right on top of it.
It's crazy, yes. Most of the schools at our level have someone who manages the sport. It's easy to get in touch with them. It's easy to find out this information and all. Sometimes when we play big schools, such as this past year in Michigan. We played the University of Michigan, and we went up there, and they have like 4 people to do my job, and I'm trying to do the job of like 4 other people all at once. It was a little overwhelming at times, but it's cool to see how the big schools do it, because eventually the goal one day would be to be in a similar situation. But sometimes, because JU is sort of at the bottom of the food chain a little bit, I guess you could say, in Division I. The Florida State and Floridas of the world, they schedule JU for games in order to pay them, not necessarily to get a win, but to play a team that is in a winnable game, certainly. Whereas, where does JU go to find those type of games? You have to a lot of times leave Division I. And so depending on the sport, you get different types of teams. And we don't have a lot. And the downside of Florida is you don't have a lot of Division II and Division III opponents around here.
You really don't.
It's just not many. It's Division I, or it's a lot of times these kind of secondary teams. And so we end up playing, for example, Trinity Baptist is a school on the west side of Jacksonville I'm sure you've never heard of, but it's here in town, Trinity Baptist College, and they're in like the NACCA or something, which is like a Christian college league in the state of Florida. And when you reach out to them, they obviously do not have the resources that a Division I school has. They have volunteers helping them out. They have all sorts of other stuff that make things difficult. So it's sometimes a challenge just to make sure you can get a roster and everything. I did have a game earlier this year where we played a team, I can't remember the name, in basketball, but they had a guy who checked in who was not on their roster, and he came in the game and he played, and I felt like John Madden or Al Michaels in an old school Madden game where you create the name that doesn't have they can't say, and he just says the number of the guy. Like, that's what it was like. I was like number 12 because he wasn't there. I couldn't do anything about it. I'm sending people off to like go see if he can find an answer in between media timeouts. It was a nightmare. But fortunately, those are few and far between. But it makes you appreciate what being at the Division I level can provide.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, I know you said you do football, basketball, and baseball for JU.
Mm-hmm.
What other sports would you want to get into, or that you could possibly get into with JU?
I've done soccer, both men's and women's, over the years for ESPN3, which I enjoy the game, grew up playing it, and it's a fun sport to announce. I've done both men's and women's lacrosse. We have an event called the Moe's Southwest Grill Lacrosse Classic. It takes place every year on campus, and it's a major event in which they bring in a high-profile team for men's lacrosse, and I've done that in the past. I was not able to do it this year due to conflicts with a baseball schedule. Okay. I've done the ASUN Championship for women's lacrosse on ESPN3, which is, you think it'd be easy to transition between those two like it is men's and women's soccer, but the sports are very different rules. Very much a learning experience to get to know those. And I think that's it. I've never done volleyball or softball. I'm not ruling it out. I'm just saying that due to conflicts, usually volleyball plays on Friday nights. Well, I'm a lot of times on the road with football or something for those, or I don't want to stress the voice too much before I have a game the next day. And softball obviously has a lot of conflicts with baseball, so I don't do a whole lot of those. But those games still go on, and that's another portion of the job, which I have to schedule the people that are broadcasting the games that I'm not, because we do something like 70 ESPN3 broadcasts a year.
So you do the scheduling for other people?
Yes, yeah. So I just handle the scheduling for the broadcasters, because you have to have a play-by-play and an analyst for all the ESPN games per their rules and regulations, and sometimes that's easier said than done. There's a lot of local broadcasters that are looking for opportunities, but it's you're also trying to find the people that can do the best job possible, because you want to put out a good product.
So basing off of that, how long would it take you for, let's say, a different sport that you're not used to calling? How long would it take you to learn the rules of, because I know you take a lot of different sports, but how long would it take you to know the rules of each sport?
Especially when you got into lacrosse.
Yeah.
I know you didn't know the rules beforehand, but you definitely learned them, obviously, because you wanted to call the game correctly.
I remember downloading something. It was like the Beginner's Guide to Lacrosse or whatever. I was reading that on the way home from a basketball trip one time as I was getting ready to call my first men's lacrosse game. Women's lacrosse, I kind of cut my teeth on a couple of regular season games, and I'd been part of a few broadcasts, not as the broadcaster, but I'd done other elements in it before to kind of get my feet wet on learning the rules. And the best thing to do is to get an educated analyst next to you who you can lean on whenever you have questions. So if you sit there and you set them up to explain things, it's almost like a way to learn at the same time. So it helps out.
Gotcha. So like artists go more with basketball at least.
Yeah. Now the nice thing is like I don't need a ton of. I mean the rules. I know the rules to basketball, but the good thing about having
you have a Hall of Famer on your side, which helps you a lot.
Right, and that's the big thing with like. Say basketball and baseball and all. It's like the strategy of getting. I think I know football pretty well. I played it. I've been in it my entire life. I've been around it, and I still learn from it by bending the ears of coaches and all that. But with the basketball and the baseball, I've learned a lot over the last 5 or 6 years as far as strategy and what teams are trying to do in specific spots and why that makes sense and why that doesn't make sense. And that's the cool part about going on the road with these teams is you're on a bus or you're in an airport with these coaches and you get a chance to talk to these guys and they know the game. I mean, they know it as well as anybody, and you can learn a lot from sometimes just chatting with while you're in line getting ready to board a plane.
Okay, so question: do you get a personal relationship with the players? Like, for example, at least Frank Frangio with the voice of the Jaguars, I feel like he gets a personal relationship with the Jaguars.
Yes.
Do you get a personal relationship with some of the JU players?
Definitely. It's a situation where I think you get to a certain point where, depending on the team and how it is, it's a little bit different than other ones. But like football, for example, there's a lot of guys, so it's hard to get to know them all. But and you just travel. You don't travel as much as you do with these other sports. Basketball, it's small, right? So, I mean, it's 12 guys on a team, and you're on a bus, and you're on the road a lot because it's a long season, and you get to know them real well. And the baseball guys, this is the first year I was able to travel with baseball the entire year, and it was awesome because I got to know those guys as well as I've ever known them in the 5 years that I've done play-by-play for them, and got to really develop some relationships with these guys, and that was a neat experience. And it's funny because when I first started doing this job, I didn't know. I don't know. I was young. I was 23, so I wasn't even that much older than some of these players on these teams. I think they looked at me almost more of a contemporary than an adult, and I felt like more of a contemporary than an adult. I still did very many things that you do in college and felt not that far removed from it, and it was hard for me to look at it as a separate entity. But now that I'm closer to 30 than I was 20, it's there's definitely a separation. Now they still look at me as a young person that kind of gets it a little bit, which is nice. I don't want to be the old man yet, but at the same time, it's they recognize me because I've been involved in the school and the athletic department for long enough that it's the new players come in and they see my reactions with the old players and they want to be part of that too. Like they want to get to know me too, that kind of a thing. Whereas at first maybe I was a little nervous to get to know these or try to put myself out there to know some of these players.
So answer this question for me. Do the baseball players do dip or they do big league chew?
Depends. Most of the time it's just
Forgot sunflower seeds.
Don't forget sunflower seeds.
Yeah, they'll do a lot. They do a lot of sunflower seeds. A lot of them still. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but a lot of them still dip, and occasionally guys chew. But mostly during practice and stuff like that, when you're technically there's no rules and regulations on that.
Okay, because you won't know when it's a game.
Right, in games
up there the game, you won't know.
I'm a little too far away. I have no idea what those guys are doing down there though. But I know there's a huge tin. There's the gum tin tub. So there's a whole tub full of just different types of gum and flavors and things like that. So I mean, they're all in their packaging. So it's not like they're rubbing off each other.
They're spitting in a tub. Are they spitting in a tub? Or
no, they're not spitting. It's all unchewed gum.
No, he's talking about gum. Yeah,
gum.
not
okay.
Gum.
Man, you never know.
No. Chewing gum. They have a tub of chewing gum that they can just pick out whatever flavors they want during games.
Okay, gotcha.
And then they have bags of seeds and stuff too.
Gotcha.
With baseball, the team was probably the best they've ever been since you've started. Am I correct?
That is correct, yes. They've gotten better every year in my 5 years doing it, and this was the best team that they've had.
So how does it feel to call, we've been Magic fans, we've suffered through a lot and stuff like that with our sports franchises. How did it feel to call for a team that actually, did really well?
I think the biggest thing is that you're just counting down the days in between games. Like, you just can't wait for the next one. When a team's good, when they're winning, like the most fun you have is doing the game and getting ready for another W. And it's still a lot of fun if a team's losing because it's still, it's sports. I mean, you're in there.
Of course.
It stinks if you're at a game in which a team's getting blown out, of course, but it's for when you're actually in with a team that is involved in winning, and especially one that that is going to potentially have a chance to go to the postseason. It's a pretty unique experience, and you're just kind of counting down the time in between games.
So with that, I was really impressed with how baseball did this past season. What is your favorite sport to call, in your opinion?
I get this question a lot. It's probably the question I get the most when people find out what I do or they're just talking to me about it. But I don't really have a favorite. I mean, out of the three major sports I call, they all have different advantages and aspects to them that I like more than others. I mean, I love the storytelling nature of baseball and how it's such a beautiful game on the radio, and your job to paint a picture is so important in that sport, and the pace of it allows you to bring a little more personality and a little more flavor to it too. I can tell goofy stories and things like that when they present themselves, which is just nice, and you don't have a whole lot of extra time in certain other sports to insert little things, and it's truly a narrative that is going throughout the season that you're carrying to people.
What's your, based on top favorite sport to call, what's your favorite sports memory as a commentator? Because I know there's probably a few you have in mind, but what's your most favorite one that you've called in the past?
Man, I don't know if there's one. There are a couple of moments that stand out in recent memory. Football went to Campbell this year, and I didn't have an analyst. It's one of the few games I've ever done football without an analyst. So you did it solo? I did it solo, which it's a much better sport with an analyst. It's just the way it's designed. But the team went to triple overtime and won. And I did the whole thing. And
they didn't have a tie, like they didn't end it in a tie, they just kept on triple overtime?
Yeah, oh yeah, college football just keeps going.
Yeah, so just to make sure, they kept playing in triple overtime, eventually you kept going.
Yes, I called every snap of the entire game, and JU won. I mean, they were down 14-0 in the first 5 minutes of the game off of two picks that were thrown on the first two possessions, and came back and ended up forcing overtime and ended up with a huge stop on a fourth down in which Campbell was almost in field goal range, and it was tough, but it was a fun game to do. So that's a memory I certainly have in football. I guess in basketball, big one I have is, I don't know, maybe the Michigan game this year, just because it was a huge environment. They don't have that big upset yet. Maybe I would say the sweep of UNF this year. The first time they beat UNF for the first time since I've been on the team, calling games for the team in 5 years. So I was 0 for 10 going into this year, and they finally got not only one win at UNF Arena to start conference play, but then ended up sweeping them to end conference play, which is a pretty cool experience. And baseball this year, they beat Florida twice. The first time, I was still so new in it, and Keith was actually there for that game, as was our old roommate Eric.
Eric better be listening to this, by the way.
So they sat behind me, fed me stats and nuggets for the whole game, and JU was not very good that year, and Florida was number 6 in the country, and it was an upset. It was a major upset. Yeah. Whereas
we talked about that either one episode ago or 2 episodes ago when you and Eric went down to Gainesville to watch that game.
We did discuss that and how it was. We were basically not supposed to be in the booth, but we were allowed to be in there, but we weren't allowed to really make any noise. But when the game clinching strikeout, and you could definitely hear me in the background of that clip just going, yeah, because I was so excited that we had won that game.
Eric might have been clapping in the background.
I can see
Eric was definitely clapping.
I work with Eric, so I can see him just clapping, causing a scene and everything.
I was screaming. At that point I had no understanding of how to handle myself in a big moment or anything, so I just yelled louder than I did before. So my voice broke at the end of the sentence because I ran out of breath.
Yeah,
it was a fun night though.
as your brother, I've listened to you call every sport. I've listened to you do every play. I've listened to you basically do this your entire life. That's why I'm trying to let Mike take over this interview, due to the fact that I know basically everything about you.
brother.
You know,
Right.
We've lived together for years, all that jazz. But definitely for me, listening to you call baseball is definitely
See,
is a different experience.
There are points where at least football, I want to say football season, and sometimes even baseball season, I tune into 92.5 or 10:10 a.m. I hear Scott's on the call. I'll listen to it. Even basketball games too. I'll listen to it while I go from point A to point B. I'll listen to it, see what's going on, and all that. Because sometimes radio gets boring after a while, and having a familiar voice, I'll listen to all the time whenever it comes on.
You're definitely a local celebrity to us. That's for sure.
That definitely.
Baseball, it's funny. This year, I think I went through some constructive criticism from a professional right before the start of the season, and I went in and went into this year. I was like, man, year 5. I've been doing this for a while. I feel pretty good about my style, what I've done over the years as far as growing as a broadcaster in baseball. But I'm not. There was a lot of things, I guess, that I wasn't necessarily doing as well as I could have, and so I really worked on improving that. And the amount of baseball I did this year. I mean, I called.
I remember one call. I
called
game.
50, 60 games, like right in that range.
Yeah,
and you just find yourself getting so much better.
I remember one game. It was JU against UF, and I think it was UF. The College World Series. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the regional. Yeah.
Yes,
the regional.
yes.
I remember that one. I was just driving home. I think from work or somewhere. Going back home to my place. I just hear you calling the game against Florida, and then I was like, that's Scott. I was like, let me listen to this while I get back home. Just gives me something to listen to on the way home instead of listening to whether it be podcast or even just music in general. But I thought that was cool that you got to call the College World Series.
Yeah.
Regional, granted, it's not the College World Series, the actual one, but the regional is still pretty interesting, to be honest.
I got a lot of positive feedback this year throughout the course of the season, especially toward the end. And I mean, it feels, obviously it's great. People don't have to reach out to tell you you're doing a nice job. More often you hear from people that are telling you you've done something bad.
Yeah.
It's just the way culture is. It's the same way that it happens. Like people, there's a complaint line for a reason, and there's usually not a compliments line, right? So it's very much appreciated, and I feel like it's verification that things are improving, are getting better, and that this is the field for me, and I can continue to grow in it, hopefully.
Gotcha. So speaking of growing into it, what advice would you give for people interested in getting in the field of sports broadcasting or commentating in general?
It's something where you don't expect to get even a paying job to start. Be willing to work. I saw somebody post this on Twitter the other day, but be willing to work for free. But be willing to work for free in an environment in which you feel like you can grow and learn, and potentially get hired on at some point. I was fortunate enough that
So essentially like a quote unquote internship.
Yes, exactly. When I graduated and I moved home from college, when I had a couple months in which I was unemployed and trying to get into the field and wasn't able to. At that point, I was trying to get into television because that's what my degree kind of focused in, and that's where a lot of my experience was. And it didn't work out, and I'm glad it didn't work out because I'm much happier where I ended up. But I ended up volunteering, interning, I guess you could call it, at both 1010XL and at JU. Mm-hmm. And it was two situations in which I was able to put in my time, grow, learn in the field, and from there, I was able to get on to paid positions at both places. And I mean, that's not saying that that's going to work for everybody, but it is certainly a better situation if you can get where you potentially could grow into a paying role. And then the other thing I would suggest is just don't be afraid to network, and don't be afraid to network outside of an immediate group of people that know you. I think sometimes you can get caught in an area, an echo chamber, where you have people that may at one point have been mentors and been able to provide constructive criticism for you, but you get to the point where you know them too well and they might be a little too friendly to you, and then you just don't get that same kind of honest critique that you would get. So if you can always be looking to step outside of your boundaries, meet new people, and don't be afraid to send off your work. And if you can find somebody that is going to be honest with you, it's just going to go a long way as far as growing.
Okay. So you said basically when you came back from school, you got in like a quote unquote internship with 1010XL.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say this is just going back to schools in general. Let's say JU does close for just whatever reason. Hopefully they never
God
do.
forbid, yeah.
God forbid, exactly. What school would you pick to apply for broadcasting or commentating or anything related to sports, and why? Other than your alma mater, which I know is Xavier.
Yeah.
But I want to see, other than Xavier, what would you choose?
Providing that a job is open too.
Yeah,
not,
exactly.
Not, like
Not
every
just like
every
you.
school has an opening.
Oh, every school has an opening.
Yeah. So
And I'm picking a place that is not Xavier.
And exactly, I want to see other than Xavier because I feel like you would pick Xavier.
I mean, I would pick Florida State second because that's the
So
school
is
that
it
I
Xavier
grew up.
then Florida State?
We'll put it this way. I love where I'm at right now. And
Of
I have
course.
no desires to leave JU right now because I still have a long way to go in growing in this industry and learning in this industry. And JU is on such a fantastic upward trajectory as far as leadership and growth and everything within the school itself and the athletic department as a whole. I want to be a part of that. And there's something special about saying Jacksonville, and I'm from here. Like, this is my city. So when I say touchdown Jacksonville, like, I feel like I'm
feels
representing Jacksonville,
feels good,
That's
though.
awesome. It's awesome.
Duval.
But
Duval County,
But-
904.
yeah, eventually, I'll probably reach a point of maybe limit in growth where I'm at, and that at that point, I think, provided the opportunity presents itself and I can place myself in the proper place to be able to take advantage of it, that either Florida State or Xavier, to be the voice of either of those schools would be a dream come true.
So your first choice would be Xavier. If they had the opportunity,
If
position
somehow
open-
they both came open in the same year and I had to pick one, I would probably pick Xavier first. But
Is it because of the alma mater relation?
yeah, I think there's just something to it, and the chance to, nothing against Tallahassee. I like the city of Tallahassee, but the
Yeah.
opportunity to live in the city of Cincinnati versus the city of Tallahassee.
Oh, I don't blame it. Tallahassee's
Is-
very
That's an-
interesting city. Like, I had
Yeah.
experience
You've got
living there
some
for 4
experience there,
years. It's a very interesting city.
Yeah,
You have to grow accustomed to it. But then again, now I don't know if I could live there. But then again, if it's a job, you might have to suck it up and just deal with it.
Oh, you
and
probably
all
live
that
in
stuff.
you probably live like North Tallahassee or something.
Well, I
a
lived in
little
the
nicer.
student central middle of Tallahassee where all the students
I
were.
would get
so
away
that
from-
could,
That
you'd
That
get
would
away
be
from that.
something,
Yeah.
You would change that if you were going for career reasons.
Exactly.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Speaking of careers, if you weren't broadcasting, what would you be doing instead of broadcasting for JU or even Xavier's at FSU if the opportunity came up?
being a barista at Starbucks.
It's a good question because
Wait, hang on, hold up. You were a barista at Starbucks?
I was for my first 2 years post college. I worked at Starbucks to help make ends meet while I was basically volunteering my time
At 1010
at
XL?
1010 and JU.
Okay.
Yeah, before I was able to get on full time at JU. I was even when I was first getting paid at 1010 and at JU, it was part time work. I was
Okay.
I was contracted at JU, and I was
Working part-time
I
on
was
the side.
working just hourly at the radio station, just producing for the Frank Franchi show with Rick Ballou.
Oh,
So I was only
gosh.
there 5 hours a day or so. So it's not enough to
Throwback, right?
not enough to make a full living.
No,
But
of course not. But yeah, so you got, okay.
All
So what would you, to answer the question, what would you be doing then if it wasn't for broadcasting?
Keith could vouch for this, but if you open up my 8th grade yearbook and it says career goals, one of them is football broadcaster on ESPN. So I had it in
But
my
the
mind.
question is
I
if
know.
I could
But
take a picture of that and prove
That's
it,
why
too.
this is a hard question to answer because
All you've
basically
known
from the
is
time I was
broadcasting.
13, I knew I wanted to do this.
Okay.
And before,
So let me,
it's hard. It's
let
hard.
me make it a better question. What do you feel like you're good at other than broadcasting and make that a possible career?
Trivia. Oh wait, no, that's not a group. That's not a group.
That's not really a trivia.
I've
You
always
could be on Jeopardy.
I've always joked I have a very small and specific set of skills, and that's why it'd be very hard for me to work in another field. But I wanted to be a dentist when I was growing up. Now that would require going back to school, obviously,
Yeah.
and maybe be a little outside of my abilities range. I was never the greatest in science and all that.
Could you cast a little more on why you wanted to be a dentist?
I don't know. I just kind of wanted to be a dentist, and Hermie, from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, wanted to be a dentist too. So I like that movie. So
You're basing off that.
yeah, I was Hermie.
Come
I was
on,
Hermie.
everyone had something like that.
I guess, but Rudolph, the movie, come on now.
It's a good movie.
I could potentially teach. I think I could try and find an outlet for writing, even though that's a harder and harder thing to get into. Though I think it's just transforming as opposed to going away. I do enjoy writing, and I do that for some of my job now. I considered politics at one point in time, but I don't think that I have the right temperament for that. But
what position would you go for in politics, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, I
Like,
mean,
are you talking about
like
local and national?
oh yeah, just local stuff. Because I feel
mayor?
like you could make
Mayors,
that might be
attorney,
a bit much.
like
I mean, if I could just like represent even like just like a district for city council would be something crazy. But I feel like you can make it's easier to make an impact at the local level than it is at the national level.
Of course, yeah.
And there's a certain amount of understanding and pride that goes into working at the civic level versus the national level too. And there's less of the people just make so many, not that we have to devolve into politics, but people make so many decisions when they're in the House of Representatives or Congress based off of just getting reelected as opposed to actually trying to make a difference so many times where
fair enough.
I would rather do something where even if I was only one term and I felt like I did it well, then that would be something. But I always did it growing up. Like I was a student council guy and all this other jazz, even though I have a really bad track record of winning elections. It would be hopefully none of these things.
Is that dating back to high school?
Yeah, actually,
Middle school.
I went 0 for 4 in high school elections. Yet I served on the student council twice.
There you go. At least you served on some council.
Yeah, I got into 2 positions unopposed. That helped.
That was me, 8th grade chaplain.
I was treasury 8th grade.
I was 8th grade class
Victor.
president. That's where I peaked. I peaked politics-wise. So hopefully none of these things have to be answered because I can do this, my actual career, for a long, long time.
Do you think you could hang on.
Yes, it is.
Do you think you could be a better voice of the Jaguars than Frank Frangie?
No comment. Frank Frangie is one of my mentors in this business. He is one of my favorite guys I've ever worked with. And I hope that he is the voice of the Jaguars for a long, long time. I would love to maybe one day down the line succeed him, but many years in the future. That would be great, but Frank is...
Please, next 5 years.
So let's say Frank steps down and they offer you the job. Are you doing it in your Brian Sexton voice, or are you doing it in your own?
He's got to be doing it his own. Come on, we got to have the Scott Manze voice.
David in the shotgun.
A little background: Scott actually did that at a what was it? A fundraiser or something at school?
It was through church. There was a group that did fundraisers through youth group. It was like an extension of youth group. They called it Fun. It was like fellowship and something else. Can't remember the exact. Something. Right. And so they brought in Brian Sexton as the celebrity MC of the evening. There was an auction portion, things of that nature to raise money, and there was a special section in which I was brought up to conduct the interview with Brian Sexton. So it was almost similar. It was like the opposite version of what we're doing right now.
You're doing an interview,
yes,
but okay.
And I'm asking about his profession and what how he got into it, everything like that. And when the interview ended, one of the members' dads got up or adults got up, and he goes, well, Scott does a Brian Sexton impression. And he's like, oh, do you now? And I was like, I don't know if I want to do this on stage in front of him. And we took, I think, suggestions from the crowd in which they came up with certain a scenario, if you will. And I'd already kind of done this as like a quote-unquote party game. Like whenever PE got rained out freshman year, like we would just sit in the gym and people would just give me scenarios and I would call them. Like it was kind of a fun thing. And so I got the scenario. I don't remember necessarily what it was. It was something along the lines of like, I think Byron Leftwich was still on the team. So it was like Leftwich to Jimmy Smith for a touchdown from 25 yards out. So it's like, Leftwich in the shotgun, takes a snap, looking to his right, throws into the end zone. Jimmy Smith is there. Touchdown, Jacksonville. And the crowd is like, oh, that's great. And he looked at me and he's like, not bad. So
it's got to be awkward if you're him, though. Like,
I know. You don't necessarily want to hear that per se. I get it. It's
I'm
an
a
awkward
local
situation
celebrity.
for him.
I'm not Arnold Schwarzenegger or something like that.
I went back to the table where his his wife was sitting there, and I sat down and she goes, he'll never admit this, but you sounded dead on like him. And I was like, well, thank you. This was awkward enough. He was very kind.
Let me go, please.
Yeah, he was very kind. He invited me out to training camp as a personal guest. I got to go with one of my friends out to training camp later on that month. We had passes. My first press pass I ever got was a Jaguars one, which was pretty cool. And I'm down on the sidelines at the Florida Boot practice fields, and we're watching the guys run right by us and everything. And I'm just asking him questions, and he's talking about getting into the biz and all this other stuff. And he could not have been more gracious after the fact. We have not really crossed paths too many times since then, interestingly enough. But I don't do a whole lot of work with the Jaguars. But yeah, he was great.
Okay, so I've got 2 more questions for you.
Sure.
One.
This is gonna be part of my take where we say we have 2 more.
Yeah, 2 more.
Last I got 2. I've got at least 2 more questions.
The actual last question.
My first of the last 2 questions. Who, I want to say, give me 2 people you've loved working with in the past, whether it's Artis Gilmore, anyone of, because I know Artis Gilmore because I've seen some games on ESPN3 with JU for basketball. Who are your 2 favorite people to work with in terms of whatever sport?
As an analyst.
As an analyst, yes, as an analyst.
Okay. I don't have as wide an experience as you might think with this, but one.
Maybe I've got 3 more questions.
Yeah, I kind of have a tie for one. I mean, working with artists is a pleasure just because it's just so special to work with a Hall of Famer, and we've gotten to know each other so well over the last few years. It's a unique relationship, and it's one I treasure greatly. David Lamb is someone that I did not know well before we started working together. And I just knew him as like a guy I kind of grew up listening to some in local sports radio, but he was already on his way out kind of at 10-10 or being phased back a little bit by the time I got in there. And I've really enjoyed calling football games with him over the last few years. He's like kind of like your crazy grandfather that you're like doing. Yeah. Like we've done enough now, 4 years together, that we have a good rapport as well. And then this one's a little off the beaten path, but Nolan Alexander, who's now the voice of the Bethune-Cookman Wildcats, and someone who I worked with as an intern when he was at JU before he got the job. And he was a play-by-play guy by trade, but he was the analyst for football with me on the radio for 2 years, and we just had a blast. We did football and baseball together, and we just got each other from game one. We got each other. We were able to read each other's kind of thoughts. We were able to flow back together. He was a true professional. I learned a lot from him. He may say he learned something from me. I'm not sure if he needed to learn anything from me at that point, but it was just so much fun doing games with him. For the 2 years he was at JU as well.
Okay, so those are the 2 you've worked with that you've enjoyed working with. What about 2 people you've not worked with yet that you would love to work with, at least in the Jacksonville side, maybe possibly nationally? I want to see what your opinion is on that.
Well, I think people have joked about this before because Artis as an analyst is a unique person to work with and how he is. I think Bill Walton would be a blast to try to stumble my way through a game with him. It would
now,
be such
a not on alcohol, except for like half the time he's drunk when he's calling the calls.
Probably high.
I don't think he's drunk.
Probably high.
He's definitely high.
Yeah, it would be a fun challenge. I respect the heck out of Dave Pash for his ability to kind of string him.
But that wouldn't work with you
together.
though. At least you're the play-by-play. Like that wouldn't work with him though.
No, he's the analyst.
I'm saying, well, you're the analyst though. Wouldn't that?
No.
Be a conflict? No, I'm talking about Dave Pash.
Not with Dave Pash. I'm just saying I respect Dave.
Oh, Dave Pash working with Bill.
Yeah,
okay,
I
was confused.
I wouldn't do that. And then
that's difficult.
Because I was saying, I don't know. That's 2 analysts right there. That's a little.
Who else would be my number 2?
What about I don't want to say sport by sport because that can be a little difficult, but.
It could be anything, yeah. Anybody, anywhere.
Professionally or even collegiately.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like a really good like football analyst that I would enjoy working because
John Gruden.
He's probably a little
not
too much.
I couldn't even say that straight face. Not John Gruden.
Honestly, I think Baselli would be funny just because he's very passionate.
So you're looking for friends.
He's in. No, I'm not saying that. I just enjoy some of the.
I'm trying to get him in trouble.
He's honest, and that. I mean, you're just looking for someone who's
too honest. But I agree what you mean.
You're looking for someone who's honest and passionate as an analyst,
exactly, yeah.
who knows how to get out of the way too, and that's an underrated skill and. That'll be fun. If you were going to look at a local level, I guess he would be a fun dude to call a game with one day. Maybe he'll come to a JU game one day. Who knows?
Hopefully. Baselli, hope you're listening. All right, so I've got a question here. Do you think you could call I just pulled up David Garrard's game-running run against the Steelers.
Oh, yes.
Game saving run, not winning run. in 2007 against the Steelers.
The Al Michaels call. I saw.
Yes,
I think I know
Michaels
that off the
call.
top of my head. Where he's like,
Don't worry, I muted it. So, do you think you could call it right here? Because I put it on mute. I lowered the volume. Do you think you can call it right here? I'm gonna test your play-by-play.
All right. Jerome Carter is the safety that made the tackle, right?
I'm not sure.
I'm gonna go with yes.
All right, we'll see.
All right, so I'm playing the clip right now. It's on mute. So.
All right, we'll see how this goes.
Give me 1 second. All right, come on. T-Mobile, come on, load now. All right, here we go.
You can never trust it.
All right, 4th down and 2. 1:56 to play. Jaguars trail by 1, need to get into field goal range. Garrard in the shotgun. One back to his right. Drops back. Tucks it under his arm. Running up the middle. He's got a hole. 35, 30. Breaks a tackle at the 25, 20. Down to the 15. Brought down at the 10. Jerome Carter with a touchdown-saving tackle. And the Jaguars are in business with 1:43 and counting to play.
God, that was golden.
God, that was amazing. That was amazing.
I don't think I could have done that years ago, but that's one of those things where you.
That was amazing. I tried to fast forward to Scobie's game-winning kick,
Scobie's
but
game.
that
It was
wasn't
a chip shot. That was anticlimactic, right? So it's at the end of the day, it's not a.
I just pulled up.
Not the
I was
great
like, you know what?
call.
Let me pull up one call that every Jaguars fan remembers, and that's the one everyone remembers.
To be honest with me, like, do you like pull up a thesaurus to like find other words to say for certain things for like, you know,
Like
throws in a
AJ
strike,
Wojnarowski
fires
on
in
the
a strike,
draft night.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
AJ.
Baseball. I do have a sheet of. It's got to be 50 to 60 words to describe a hit. And because
There's a lot,
you're just trying to find different ways to bury
Slaps.
that. And
Bangs.
Doc Emmerich for NBC hockey,
yeah.
is the best at it. And it's so hard because you listen back and you realize you use certain words as crutch words and you go back to them over and over again. Honestly, the best way to prepare, just read. Read a little bit every day, and you're just exposed to more words, and then they're just going to naturally enter your lexicon.
Read
and then
anything or
read
like
anything.
recaps of sports?
Read anything.
Okay, read
I
anything.
think just reading in general is smart because you're going to learn words, and a lot of these words carry over into ways that you could apply them into sports based off the various sport. But be well read. It's a huge way to grow that vocabulary without sitting there trying to like cram like it's a test.
Gotcha. I've got at least one. I
right,
said
that's
3
fine.
last questions
Yeah.
earlier. This is
Okay.
my last question.
All right, PFT.
Give me.
What is it?
Yeah, I know exactly. That's not like PFT. So, give me one commentator from each sport, the ones you've at least covered, that you admire or look up to, whether that's football,
You don't say Gus Johnson. Okay.
basketball, baseball, even hockey. Like you just said, Doc Emmerich. I know he's the best. I don't follow hockey, but I know Doc Emmerich's
Yes.
the best. Seen from Twitter, seen from at least Keith, and you just confirmed it pretty much. Like from your sports that you've called, football, basketball, baseball, any other sport, soccer even, if you follow soccer that much. Give me a commentator that you've looked up to or admired in the past few years.
I grew up listening to Gene Deckerhoff and Florida State football on the radio.
Okay, Gene.
I think I started doing that probably when I was a baby. I'm sure my dad had it pulled up on the radio. We'd be in the car or whatnot, and I think it was as natural as anything else I've ever listened to in my entire life. Gene Deckerhoff, and I have had the pleasure to meet him a couple of times, both professionally
Yes, I met
and
Gene,
casually, and he is an absolute joy and as great as you
One
could
of the
possibly.
nicest human beings you can meet.
So many. They say what? Don't meet your heroes, right? Well, meeting him was actually an absolute pleasure, and I still listen to him as often as I can because I absolutely love Gene, and a lot of my style. I don't want to say I've copied my style, but I've taken certain elements. Especially the biggest thing is he is someone who, if you're not listening carefully and you hear him get excited, you have to listen in.
Yes.
Because you don't know whether or not that's going to be the Seminoles making a play or
Or
the opposing team making a play.
I made that
And
mistake
I
so
have
many
always
times.
taken great pride in being someone who
Gets the suspense up.
does not have a meltdown, I guess, when the other team scores. Like, it's not a huge. It's if a big play happens, it's a big play. It's exciting, and you should exhibit that in a broadcast. So I've always tried to be that kind of person who translates that regardless of who is the team having the successful play or moment.
So would Gene be your football and basketball guy, or because I know he does both?
He's my
Or
football
all
guy
of them,
for
actually.
sure. He's my football guy.
Okay.
Football, television football. I mean, man, who
Well, how about you think of football?
Spiro Adidas.
No,
He
not
trashes
Adidas.
Jackson. I don't care about him.
I love Kevin Harlan.
Okay.
For
basketball?
For football.
He's really
Yeah, he is
really good at football. If you've ever heard him on the radio, his ability to describe action is impeccable. You would talk about using a lot of words now. He'll describe a ball, just a casual slant route over the middle, as lofts it into the arms. Something that the casual guy is not
something
going
that
to
gets
say.
your image work, your mind working.
Exactly. So where you have an absolute visual, I really like Ian Eagle in basketball. I think he's tremendous as far as his level of excitement and picking up his tone as well. He has a distinct style that I'm a huge fan of, and he works very well with his color guys. Radio basketball, I'm trying to think if there's anyone that really stands out. It's funny because like NBA, you don't really know radio play-by-play guys.
I know one of them is radio.
The Magic guy has a really good voice.
Who?
Not
David Steele.
The Spanish guy.
David Steele?
No. They're radio guys.
Because I know the radio guy for at least for the Knicks is Mike Breen.
Yeah.
That's a rare situation. Yeah,
the rare one.
Yeah.
That's the one I know.
Joe Sunderman does Xavier basketball on the radio, and I've listened to him a ton over the years, and I enjoy his style and how he calls a game and how he works with Byron Larkin, the color guy. And baseball, I mean, Vin Scully was the GOAT. I mean, he's the greatest of all time.
Baseball for Dodgers, right?
Yes. Keith knows that I would go on MLB, I would just turn on MLB Network late at night because they would play a lot of Dodgers games and
because
all.
I remember when I was
Dodgers D-bag.
It's like we don't care about the game, we're just listening.
Exactly. I remember at least the last maybe 2 years ago, when I came over to your old place, you, Keith, and Eric were living together. Eric at one point put the TV on mute. I'm just basing on memory. Put Gene Deckerhoff on radio.
Yes.
And listen to the game.
Yes, we have done that.
What?
We have done that. And
I was like, that's actually very interesting because I've never thought about putting the TV on mute and putting the radio play-by-play.
Here's a funny story about that. When I was in, middle school, I would sit there and pull out the radio and pull out the headphones, and I would listen to the game while the game was on TV. Now, obviously the radio is a little bit faster, right? A couple of seconds faster.
Yeah.
Not a huge difference, but just enough to where I would hear the plays before. And I was tipping plays, I guess you could say, when I first started doing it. And my dad basically had a rule at that point. It's like, all right, if you're going to either you don't listen to the radio or you figure out a way to not let the play go. So it might have actually become a good skill to have just in general as far as composing myself when great things were happening, because if a huge play was happening, I would know, and I would have to basically keep myself, like I could sit there and do something like a fist clench or something like, nobody's looking at me, so they're not going to notice. They're watching the TV.
Enough.
So I could get away with a little bit of a little fist pump or like a little bob or something like that, but that would be it.
You clench your fist,
right, and then have to wait the 3 seconds until it happened on the TV, and then I could celebrate with everybody else. But I did that for years. I think all the way through late middle school and high school, I listened to games on Saturdays while watching them on TV. And I this past year I didn't even have a television. I moved into my apartment. I just, for whatever reason, didn't buy a TV before.
Don't comment on Grandpa moving in his own place.
I didn't buy a TV when I first moved in, and then the school year started, and I got really busy and just never thought about it. So I listened to pretty much every Florida State game that year that I was able to follow, and it wasn't enough of them because they were playing they were playing at noon at the same time as JU, like every week it felt.
It wasn't even worth this past year.
And,
stupid Jimbo Fisher. And
I listened to a lot of Jaguars games, and ones I didn't go to or go out for, I would listen to, especially road games sometimes. And I listened to the entirety of the Major League Baseball playoffs on the radio this year, and it's just, I think it's something where I think a lot of people appreciate it, but I think when you're in the industry, you just have a certain level of different amount of passion for it, and I love it. I have the MLB Pass this year where I listen to games all the time, and it's tremendous. I love the medium. I love being in the medium, and I just hope that maybe there's a kid out there one day that's listening to me the same way that gets inspired.
Okay. Yeah. So I know I said the last question earlier. Whatever. It's all right. I sound like PFT and Big Cat, whatever.
All day.
If you had to pick between being a radio broadcaster or a TV announcer, like the play-by-play, like what's the name? I can't remember.
Joe Buck?
CBS. Like no,
Jim
God,
Nantz.
no, not Joe
Jim
Buck.
Nantz?
Jim Nantz. Thank you. Like Jim Nantz or I guess
Wait,
Spiro
you don't like
Didis
Joe Buck,
or
right?
Joe Buck. I don't care for Joe Buck.
I love Joe Buck.
He's grown on me a lot. He's gotten a lot better.
He's gotten better, I guess, but that's not the point. Like one of those guys. Would you prefer radio or TV?
It's not even a question anymore, and it used to be one for me when I was first coming up, when I was doing a little bit of both for the first time and trying to figure out what the best avenue for me going forward. Radio. I just love it. It's such it's a completely different avenue. It's when you can either.
Is it because you don't like, just for example, like, at least the beginning, you don't like to be on camera, or was it just because
Here's the thing.
it just sounds better on radio?
A lot of people that are in this industry have an ego. I mean, I'll count myself as one of them.
Everyone has an ego.
Right, everyone
no
has an
matter what.
ego, and like I do a job in which I'm convinced that people like to listen to me. I mean, that's anybody
Fair
who's
enough.
worked in sports talk radio, like
We like people listening to us,
We
so.
record podcasts, right? Because we think that people are going to care enough about it to listen to us, right? So that's
Subscribe and unsubscribe and subscribe again. It's just a process.
you have to have a certain level of ego, and that ego. I mean, I'll be honest. I like the medium too, but there's a certain. You're the star as the play-by-play guy on radio. You are the star
definitely.
on TV. The analyst is the star, and it's a certain skill you have to set up that guy to be the star or gal, however type of situation you're working. But the analyst is really second fiddle to you because you have to paint the picture on a radio broadcast, and if you don't do a good job at your job of really describing the action, keeping people abreast of time, score, something as simple as what side of the field the ball is on, then people are lost at home. And there's as they say in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. You have a lot of power in that.
Great Spider-Man reference there.
You have a lot of power in the play-by-play chair on a radio broadcast, and it's your
Compared
job.
to not being on TV? Because I know you did ESPN 3, but
Yes, I have done it. And granted, would I love to work at a high-level television broadcast one day?
CBS?
That would be phenomenal because you have everything at your fingertips, at your disposal. I mean, I work at a very low-level version of that, which I'm setting up my own equipment. I'm troubleshooting in the middle of games when things go wrong. Yeah, that's not Al Michaels doesn't have to do that.
No, never.
Al Morgan
I bet he
lift
hasn't
the
done that in
fingertip.
years.
Yeah, no, he walks in, he sits down, he puts the headset on, and there's a certain level of stardom that comes with radio play-by-play. Plus, most of the time, the radio guy is ingrained with the team, right? So you're the voice of the Jaguars.
Yeah,
You're
it's
the
not like your
voice
TV
of the Seminoles.
broadcast. Okay.
You can be a little biased toward your team, and I like that nature of it too. I like being the voice of the Dolphins in that I can be pro JU. I don't have to be straight down the middle because I'll be honest, sometimes it's hard. When I do ESPN 3, technically I'm supposed to be split down the middle. I'm not supposed to be biased one way or the other. And there was a game in the conference tournament a couple years ago where there was a really bad call at the end of the game that ended up costing JU a chance to win it. And I look back on it and I'm very proud of my ability to stay professional in the moment, especially when they showed the replay. But boy, was it hard. One of the hardest things I've ever done in a broadcast was sit there and not to say, like, that was a flat-out blown call, because it was.
So do you hate UNF? And Richard Miller?
I do not.
And
I do
Richard
not.
Miller?
When I am
although he's
doing...
a baby, he's a dad now, but do you hate Richard Miller?
No, I love Richard. He's one of my... He's
Sorry,
one of
Richard,
my-
we love you. We're just messing with you.
He's one of my best friends in this business and outside of this business, and I hope that one day he gets a chance to get back in as full-fledged as he was until recently at UNF because he deserves it.
We can talk off air about that.
Okay.
But going back to the painting the picture thing, I've noticed that when I tune into you on the radio, I'll hear the similarities to Gene. Gene always did a good job where if I turn on the radio as soon as I got in my car, 2 seconds later he'd be like, it's 13-10 Florida State, 7 minutes left in the third quarter, Seminoles are driving. You do a very good job of letting me know where we are in the game, what's going on, and that's one of those things that's really underappreciated when you're listening on the radio. You don't think about that until you actually start listening. You're like,
And you're wondering,
man,
right?
when is this? Is it the first inning? Is it the last inning? What the hell is going on? And you do a really good job of just letting us know, oh, this is where we are at in the game. Okay, good. I'm back in it. it's happening now.
It's a cardinal sin in broadcasting to not sit there and say time. It's funny because you sit there and you're part of it, right? Mm-hmm. So you sit there and you go, man, I'm saying this a lot. But that's because you are saying it a lot. But think about it. You get in your car and you drive down to the gas station down the road. And if it's a 10-minute round trip and you get in your car and you get up gas and then you drive home and you don't get time and score one time, that's a disaster.
Yeah, you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, as far as the broadcast.
It could be the last inning or the first inning. You have no idea.
And it's one of those situations where, especially when you're in it and you're cognizant of it, you probably are guilty of it at times. Mm-hmm. But I get in the car and I find myself yelling at the radio. I'm like, "What time is it? What is the score?"
See, at least for me, when it comes to I listen to podcasts when I get in my car. I sometimes have to play it back 30 to 45 seconds to see what the hell I listened to recently. Yeah. But the thing is, with live radio, you can't do that, so I feel like it's responsibility to at least update everyone what's going on.
And the other big part of radio is you don't think about it. Most of the time, people aren't sitting. This isn't the 1920s. People aren't sitting there and staring at the radio
all day,
taking in every word that you say and comprehending it. You have the radio on while you're doing something else. Mm-hmm. Either you're driving in your car, you're out at a cookout, you're cleaning your house. Like there's always something else that you're doing while you're listening to the radio, so your comprehension's not going to be 100%. And that's another reason why it's so important to repeat time and score over and over again.
Well, wow, that was a really long interview. I'm really impressed with everything we were able to ask. I'm
surprised we got this.
You guys had great questions.
I hope you listeners enjoy everything about this. Before we go, though, I wanted you to plug your own podcast. Tell us a little bit more about Manze and Miller on Sports.
Manze and Miller on Sports. I think we're officially 3 years in.
Wow.
I think we started in 20. No. Yeah, 3 years. We've done 3 years of this now.
Holy cow.
I know. And Richard and I, we should be coming back hopefully with an episode this week. I got to get in touch with him and figure out. I've been out for the last 2 weeks out of town, so it was difficult to record. But
tell him we dissed him in this one.
I'll let him know. But I can't tease like what it's going to be about or anything like that yet because we have not brainstormed. But it is available on Apple Podcasts, on the all new Google Podcast app, and SoundCloud as well.
Remember to subscribe, unsubscribe, and then subscribe again.
And leave a review. And of course, for those of you that maybe haven't listened to it before, the premise is that Richard and I have been around the city we both worked in sports in this town for quite a while. And what we try to do is bring you analysis of the happenings in sports Jacksonville sports that aren't necessarily the traditional. We don't talk.
So like the Armada.
Right. We don't talk Jags every week because everybody else is talking Jags. So we'll talk about the Armada. We'll talk about the Shrimp. We'll talk about business happenings. We'll talk about JU and UNF. We'll talk about things, all of those kind of second-tier things, if you will.
Definitely also give them a like on Facebook as well. Yep. And give Scott a follow on Twitter if you don't already, at Scott Manze. Just as easy as mine. Just change the first name.
I remember when your Twitter name was, what was it, Chief Keef? Or was that Instagram
Chief Keef 23. Yeah,
that was Brosha 16. So.
That was thanks to the boys that are luckily here with us this weekend. But Scott, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for thinking that people might care enough to listen to this. So hopefully,
people don't care anything about Jacksonville related, to be honest.
If people care about anything Jacksonville related, they'll care about this podcast, and hopefully they give us a listen.
And we'll see if our friend Katie, listens to this podcast or not.
I'll be listening.
She says that she's here.
Well, take it easy, Scott.
Thank you.
All right, so thank y'all for listening. I hope you enjoyed that interview. Make sure you listen to Manze and Miller on Sports. They got a really good podcast. You can listen to them on SoundCloud or really basically every podcast platform. But that's all we got for this episode. We will have another episode coming real soon with more content about other things. Shout out to all the boys. Shout out to Daisha for coming up with some questions to ask Scott for that interview. And just shout out to Scott for giving us that interview. Obviously, it shouldn't be too hard to get your own brother on a podcast, but, I hope you all learned a little bit more about the voice of the JU Dolphins, and if you know anyone else that would be down for an interview, please let us know. We'd love to have them on the show. and we can talk a little bit more. So you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you all for listening, and don't forget, trust the process. Bye-bye.